Hi there, these comments are for DL, and I am Michael, the founder, owner, and the materials writer for all of your lessons at my 7-step system to pass a TOEFL IBT. My goodness, you are one of my TOEFL writing bootcamp students, and you have chosen integrated writing practice test number 40. It is super impossibly difficult. Why would you choose this one? My goodness, this is a very, very tough. I read your essay. I'm going to put you at 3.5 out of 5, 22 points out of 30 on this. I'm actually going to do some error correction right now, but here's my first impression. First of all, the reading passage contains so many ideas, and the lecture contains so many ideas, it's very difficult to try to juxtapose these ideas together in a compare and contrast essay. That's why I call it super impossibly difficult. You actually did a pretty good job on that. However, it's just not quite developed enough. This is one of your main issues here. You just need to develop your ideas a little bit more. For example, right now you're at 170, but I would recommend closer to 350 words per 350 words on this type of writing task. Now, I know that's hard to do. You can probably do that quite easily on a normal, easier type integrated practice test. The TOEFL would never be this hard. So my best guess is if your score is 22 right now, you will be a lot higher than that on the actual TOEFL IBT exam. Alright, so what do we do here? I'm looking over at the rubrics right now. So it says here 3.5 is where I'm putting you. It says your response is connected, but you communicate unclear, global, maybe imprecise connections of the points made in the lecture to the points expressed in the reading passage, right? So you need to make the connections a little bit clearer and a little bit more developed. That's really what you're trying to do here. Looking at your essay right now, I'm going to go ahead and just make some error corrections first, and then I may offer some restructuring and developmental suggestions. So your first paragraph, the reading disagrees with the lecturer on the origin of Venus, though both note that any unrealistic hypothesis could benefit the development of science by providing worthwhile evidence against it. The reading uses ancient record in support of the view that Venus used to be a comet ejected from Jupiter. The lecturer attempts to disprove the reading by citing, you might put the word "and" because you have record is a count noun. So by citing an even older record, the reading uses the Bible as evidence that ancient people had seen Venus's comet tail. The lecturer attempts to discredit this by arguing that Venus would be. Now, this is where you're having some problems with your grammar here. I'm going to say here would have. It would have evaporated if it had been a comet ejected from Jupiter. So what did I do there? We're trying to talk about a past impossible condition. So the lecture's arguing that this didn't happen. So it's arguing that Venus, and you're using what's called the past perfect to create that type of hypothetical impossible tone in the past. So Venus would have evaporated if it had been a comet ejected from Jupiter. Going further, the reading claims that the comet from Venus's tail even brought carbohydrates to the Earth. The lecturer believes a comet cannot bring anything to the Earth but massive extinction. Then you see here, lastly, the reading provides some evidence that the Earth had been stopped I'm going to change this that the rotation of the Earth had stopped. No passive here. So the rotation of the Earth had stopped. For a while because of the gravity of the comet Venus. The lecturer claims if Venus I'm going to change this had such strong gravity, there couldn't have been any comet tails seen by naked eyes. Alright, so these are the grammatical corrections. So the good thing is you have pretty good control over your language use, right? Alright, let's take a look at the grammar part of my course. So you actually don't have too many problems in here. So I'm gonna focus more on showing you how to restructure your ideas in a minute. But I think lesson number 16, maybe lesson 15, 16, 17, word order using count and non-count nouns. I think you might want to take a look at that, and verb tenses, but I may not have what you're looking for in here. If you go to Google, type in the keywords real, unreal conditions in English grammar. So you're having trouble talking about past unreal conditions, and you're not sure how to do that. For example, I corrected some of your grammar to show that you can use the past perfect tense to talk about unreal conditions in the past. So that's something that you can take a look at. There's one other lesson I want to point out here. Where is it? Right here, articles. Lesson number 20. So you're not always sure when to use a, and, or the before nouns, right? So I would have you take a look at that. Maybe passive voice. You had a little bit of trouble with passive voice. So if you find that my lesson doesn't have enough information in there, just go to Google and just type in the word how to use passive voice in academic writing, and that's probably good enough. Okay, your first paragraph, we need a little bit better structure to this particular essay. So, you say the reading disagrees with the lecture on the origin of Venus, though both note that any unrealistic hypothesis could benefit the development of science. That's probably not specific enough around which you can organize the essay. So, I'm going to take this idea, let's compare it, because what you do in the intro is important. So here it says, the author in the reading passage uses ancient records to explain the origin of Venus by claiming that Venus was ejected from Jupiter, maybe went on an eccentric orbit as a comet until it finally, and went on an eccentric orbit as a comet until it finally settled into the orbit that it is in today, and the speaker in the listening passage casts doubt on that information. Now, what I'm going to show you is if you use these points here, I'm going to take the idea of the ejection of Jupiter, going on the eccentric orbit, and then being a comet with a tail, and then settling in. I'm going to take these kind of three ideas here, and then put them directly below it. So here, I'm showing you how you can create a little bit better, tighter organization. Notice how I'm using transition words. First of all, about 3,500 years ago, Venus, according to the reading passage, was forced out of Jupiter as a comet. Second of all, the reading passage states that Venus went on an irregular orbit and finally settled in the orbit that it is in today. Finally, Venus traveled through the solar system as a comet with a tail as it was looking for a place to settle. So now I have to take some details from the reading passage to develop these things a little bit more, and then I find the information in the lecture that disagrees with each of these points. Okay, let's see how we've developed these paragraphs. We have the author and the readings, we have that, so let's go to the next one. So I'm developing each idea a little bit more. So first of all, about 3,500 years ago, Venus, according to the reading passage, was forced out of Jupiter as a comet. During this process, Venus's gravitational field pushed other planets out of their orbits, thereby permanently changing their rotations. Second of all, the reading passage states that Venus went on an irregular orbit and finally settled in the orbit that it is in today. According to the reading passage, as Venus approached Earth, it caused the Earth to stop or start its rotation, which explains why the Chinese recorded, I'm going to say here, prolonged darkness and light. Finally, Venus traveled through the solar system as a comet with a tail was looking for a place to settle. Red dusty particles of the comet, according to this thinking, must have fallen from the Earth, which is why Egyptians, as it is recorded in the Bible, reported blood is everywhere. Okay, now I think this is the structure. I'm trying to walk you through the structure of this thing, right? Okay, let's go to another page here so we can kind of see the whole thing here. Now, the next step here is we now need to take information from the reading passage. Now, let me show you where we're at right now. So far, I haven't even mentioned the lecture yet, right? Compared to yours, I'm already at 203 words, right? So now I'm going to take information from the lecture as it relates to each of these specific ideas. That is my next step. Okay, let's take a look at each paragraph. Here, this is the information from the lecture. In contrast, the lecture argues that if Venus had been ejected from Jupiter, the energy would have caused Venus to become so hot it would have vaporized. The next paragraph, however, the speaker believes that it is almost impossible that Venus could have changed its orbit so dramatically over the last few thousand years probably can just say that, into the circular orbit that it follows now. Finally, Venus traveled through the solar... No, I'm looking at the lecture. Conversely, the lecture believes that Venus is just too big of a planet to have ever had a visible tail, as the reading passage explains, because the gravity on Venus is just too strong. I think that's it. So this is what I have here. So I think what you have is good, and we can disagree on exactly how to order this information, but the one thing that I think you could have done better is to develop your topic a little bit better, maybe use some transition words to help show the connection of ideas, right? So now let's take a look at the whole essay one more time so we can just get a sense of how it all fits. Okay, here we go. So the author in the reading passage uses ancient records to explain the origin of Venus by claiming that Venus was ejected from Jupiter and went on an eccentric orbit as a comet until it finally settled into the orbit that it is in today, and the speaker in the listening passage casts doubt on that information. First of all, about 3,500 years ago, Venus, according to the reading passage, was forced out of Jupiter as a comet. I said forced out because it's a synonym for ejected. During this process, Venus's gravitational field pushed other planets out of their orbits, thereby permanently changing their rotations. In contrast, the lecture argues that if Venus had been ejected from Jupiter, the energy would have caused Venus to become so hot it would have vaporized. Second of all, the reading passage states that Venus went on an irregular orbit and finally settled in the orbit that it is in today. I need to put the preposition there. According to the reading passage, as Venus approached the Earth, it caused the Earth to stop or start its rotation, which explains why the Chinese recorded prolonged darkness and light. However, the speaker believes it is almost impossible that Venus could have changed its orbit so dramatically over the last few thousand years into the orbit that it follows now. Finally, Venus traveled through the solar system as a comet with a tail as it was looking for a place to settle. Red dusty particles of the comet, according to this thinking, must have fallen from the earth, which is why Egyptians, as it is recorded in the Bible, reported that blood is everywhere. Conversely, the lecturer believes that Venus is just too big of a planet to have ever had a visible tail, as a reading passage explains, because the gravity on Venus is just too strong. And there it is. This is what I wrote. This is my, I kind of restructured and developed your ideas. This is what you wrote here. So I'm comfortable giving you a score right now, maybe between 22 and 24 points out of 30. However, if you want to get 30 points out of 30, which I believe is what you want, you need to do a little bit better development, a little bit better organization of ideas, and control your language use, particularly, I think I said articles, maybe count, uncount nouns, and also your verb tenses, particularly when you're talking about unreal past conditions. Those are some things that you can do right now to improve your writing. All right?